Welcome back, PCA families. It's another Monday, and it's another time when we are reflecting more deeply on our school and your kids and their future in this upcoming school year. As you know, this is part 3 of a 4-part series. And as I said last week, when we met with Susan Erico and talked about reading literature, that I would meet with our very own Dr. Connie Lawrence, our Dean Emeritus, who's an amazing educator, researcher, school leader, and really thought leader, I think, in terms of how your kids grow, learn, and she has been helping us a lot. And I welcome her back today. Connie, it's good to have you back.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so you're doing a lot of things still. I know you're not full-time, but you're doing a lot of instructional coaching with some of our amazing teachers and helping them get to the next level. You've also continued to think about how kids' brains form and think. And then one particular area that we're going to talk about today is artificial intelligence and what that has looked like, what it is looking like. But ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know Connie's been watching this and working with it herself, researching it, really ever since ChatGPT came on the forefront. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Connie, just for our parents to hear about this. Can you just share a little bit of your own, either your own journey or on this theme? I know you did some stuff recently with another group, and just sort of kick us off and set the stage.
I think it's important to look at AI and look at the positives and the negatives.
Yeah.
So I've spent quite a bit of time reading Christian authors and non-Christian authors about what they're saying that AI is going to do. One of the most interesting things I found is that there are different types of AI. I didn't know that.
Right.
And so that was very helpful for me to not look at AI and put it all in one bundle, but to be able to realize that we're not at the super intelligence time yet. Yeah. So I've just had a great time doing that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for really being out there and thinking, not just thinking about it, but thinking and reading those who thought about it. Maybe that would be a good place to start is what are the different types of AI, especially that our students may be encountering?
So right now we're in what's called narrow AI.
Okay.
Narrow AI performs one task really, really well.
Yeah.
So if you think Grammarly or you think Alexa, but they don't cross domains. So it does one thing very well. The next level that isn't there yet, it's theoretical, but it's assumed that it might develop within the next 10 years. It's called general AI.
Okay.
And this is AI that would match or exceed human level intelligence across a wide range of tasks. So it could learn, it could reason, it could plan, it could adapt to new situations. Some people say that's not going to happen, and other people say it's going to be within 5 years or within 2 years. But it's kind of that being able to generalize across domains as opposed to sticking with.
So I've read recently, and I don't know if this is what you've bumped into, but this discussion of agents, right? Chat or AI agents that will sort of start to do this. They'll write my emails, and as I look at my calendar and look at my contact list.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the next one are the super intelligence ones.
Okay.
And those are very futuristic. And that one, people are less convinced that that's ever going to happen. And as a believer in Jesus, God as our creator, and so on, I question if it's going to happen too. And this will be AI surpasses human intelligence in all areas. So it's that super computer that's telling everybody else what to do.
Yeah. This is like HAL 2000
Yes, along with what's called singularity.
Right.
So singularity is where computer and man become one.
Okay.
As a believer, I don't think that, I don't foresee that happening because God is still our creator. God is still God.
Okay.
But the idea was it would integrate with humans and transcend human cognition.
Right.
The problem with all of these is there's nothing out there that's duplicating the humanity of man. Man is the only one that has the humanity of man. And I think that's what we always have to keep in front of us is AI doesn't care. It doesn't love. It doesn't wonder. It doesn't it doesn't think creatively
Right.
right now. It's all input that we give.
Fascinating. So I don't know about you. I mean, we've talked enough, but moms and dads, I don't know if you've worked with generative AI like ChatGPT. Where does that fall among sort of that within the narrow and general, and then
That's still narrow AI because
yeah,
it's relying on your prompts.
yeah, it still feels it's amazing in some levels and
Mm.
shocking in others, right?
It's phenomenal in how much information it can gather and analyze very, very quickly, and I think that's one of its advantages.
Right.
One of the disadvantages is that it can draw conclusions that aren't accurate.
Yeah. So for our community, can you just outline a little bit of where do we use AI, obviously, narrow AI here at PCA and how that might show up for their kids and their families?
I think probably the most obvious ones are Lexia, where it gives students opportunities in learning and adjust according to how well they do. It can give feedback to the teachers
Hmm.
as to where their strengths are, where their weaker areas are, and it can generate materials that will help them. Map Accelerator is a math program that does similar kinds
Right.
of things. Khan Academy Writing Tutor we don't use across the school, but when ChatGPT was first developed, the first learning agency they contacted was Khan Academy
Okay.
and said, we would like you to look at this and see where you think it would fit in learning. Khan Academy is always about Socratic questioning as opposed to giving answers. So
Right.
you don't get an answer from Khan Academy. And so it's enveloped into a Khan Academy. It's called Khanmigo,
Yeah.
but it always is prompting with questions, not answers.
To really draw the student to the next level of
Yes.
engagement and thinking. So I'm just going to ask, so should families expect that Lexia, Map Accelerator, which are largely used at the younger grades, are those replacing the teacher? Where do they fit in my child's learning experience?
That's a really good question. I would say that they are individualized tools for the students where a teacher can't sit down with every student to give them feedback and exact information and make changes because they have too many students.
Right.
The AI can do that, and then the teacher can conference with the student and
Mhm.
gives the student opportunity to say, I like what I did here, I need to work better here. So it's a metacognitive tool as well.
Yeah. So if I hear you right, the teacher's still teaching and engaging his or her
Absolutely.
students for learning. This is a tool that the teacher can use to help individualize that experience
Yes.
and, back to sort of maximizing potential. It's certainly supplementary and some cases deepening.
So during COVID, we went to a blended learning model where
Right.
we integrate human interaction with technology,
Yeah.
and that's what this is.
So sort of maybe to pull this thread a little bit more, you were early on and we talked about Map Accelerator for math. And not every teacher used it the same way, but just tell me, because this has been going on for a few years now, what are some of the things that you've seen broadly, if not exclusively, and where Map Accelerator is a part of what we've seen in sort of more consistency and growth and performance across grades?
It only starts at third grade, so it isn't in the primary level. But I've been very excited to see the difference that we've seen in our third, fourth, and fifth grade.
Yeah.
They use it every day as part of their rotation. And those are the foundational years of learning your multiplication tables and all the processes of math and so on. And we have seen the results from NEWA skyrocket because of that. It has been very exciting and sends the kids into middle school with a much stronger foundation.
Yeah, we moms and dads, we did other things. We added more time for math. Teachers really focused on how they engage with the students. But this was one of the big tools that I think we can clearly look at of where that AI-enabled tool augmented a lot of other good things that are happening.
And I'll just say that Map Accelerator is linked to their Lexia, to their NEWA score.
Yes.
So every student gets just-in-time learning.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Mhm.
So there are some real benefits that we're
Mhm.
seeing. But I think that I've run into this with other parents and we've talked about it, but won't just using AI make my child lazy or dumb?
There's always a risk of that.
Yeah.
And I think we're foolish if we don't consider the risk. Some of the risks I think are most important to think about is it can replace thinking. So I don't have to think of what I want to say or think how I say it. I can just go to AI. If we're lazy thinkers, we're lazy thinkers. So
Right.
we as educators, I think, have to structure learning in such a way that AI gets used, but not for the thinking part.
Right.
It can also be a tool for cheating, and we know that. But I think the reality is right now where we have not, society has not decided just exactly how does AI get used with integrity. We need to just ask for transparency.
Right.
Just tell us how you used it and when you used it. Another risk, I think, is introducing it too early. And this is one that I think is very critical in learning development because very young children have to develop what's called crystallized learning. All the vocabulary and the culture, the semantics, the knowledge base and so on, all of that has to be learned and moved into long-term memory because you don't have enough space to hold everything. Even if you say, I can just look it up,
Right.
you only have 4 slots in your working memory, so you've lost everything else. So there has to be that background of knowledge. When I ask ChatGPT to write a unit plan, I need to know what a unit plan looks like
Right.
and what components are in there. And the same way for kids. And then they also need time to develop fluid intelligence. And fluid intelligence is all of that. I can draw that information and problem solve. So if we introduce AI before those two things have been developed, we're in real danger of keeping the kids stunted at a level that isn't good for them.
Yeah, because they won't develop those capabilities. Either one.
Right. I mean, eventually they might, but not to the level that they could. Again, that maximizing potential is critical. And then the final one that I think is really important is we need to not devalue the struggle of learning because learning is about trying a solution, seeing if it works. If it doesn't work, trying it again, the whole engineering process.
Right.
And if we make it so easy, we haven't allowed them to persist. We haven't allowed them to have resilience. The things that life isn't made of, we're just not supporting them in it. And we're just providing dopamine, which crashes very quickly. So,
Right. Well, I think, maybe this is another perspective. And, I can think back to my student days of I just wanted to get the answer, get it right. But that's not learning.
No, it's not. And we really have to change our definition of learning because you can always get the right answer. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, and really assessing that. Well, that's helpful. And I appreciate the fact that we're, you and many of the teachers are really tuned in to those risks. And I know we're still working on navigating that. We know that we're really trying to fence well how and when that's used at school. We also know it's, out of school too. And that narrowness can be everything from how I navigate, which is an interesting thing as a guy who had to learn how to navigate. Many of us did, pre, blue arrows or whatever color your arrow, and blue lines and blue arrows, right? How to mentally envision the space that we're going to drive in. When now we just put in a thing and follow a blue line.
Nice.
But that's another topic. But we're really talking about helping kids learn. And so let's go to the positive, acknowledging we're still holding the risks in one hand. How do you see that this narrow AI can really help the PCA students learn?
I think it's a great peer. So it can offer feedback on, I've written a paper, where can I improve it?
Yeah.
Grammarly is an example of that. Where do I fix the grammar? You don't need a teacher with a red pencil to do that. You can use a tool and do that. I think it forces us to be more knowledgeable. When I use AI, I'm not going to let it tell me things that I haven't read for myself.
Right.
So I think it forces me to, number one, it doesn't need to force me to read. I read anyway, but
Right.
it forces me to use the material I know versus the material I don't know, because I'm not going to trust it to give me information I don't know. But it's great at summarizing and analyzing research. So I can put in, I want these 5 authors and I want their major points and I want quotes from them, and it will most often give those to me, but there are times that I have to go back and say, that is not a quote from that person.
Yeah.
And it will admit, no, I just put a bunch of things together. So, but I think it can help us be more efficient in what we produce and more accurate, but we have to do the thinking. It doesn't think for us.
Yeah, I'd heard somebody say that and I'm not talking even for me and maybe for you, but being very aware of where my expertise and my capabilities are. And if I'm asking it to do something beyond that, where I can't responsibly, basically guarantee that this is good work that's leaving with his assistance, then I'm out over my skis in a way that...
Yeah, it's a peer, not an expert.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. So it seems to be, this potentially a really strong tool. And you've shared with me just how our students, really develop over multiple stages in many different ways. And so how do we think about training up these children, now young adults, to really maximize that potential? Maybe just how do we train up a smart child?
It's interesting, no matter what book I've read, Christian, non-Christian, they have all talked about the need to be sure that we're human. We have been created in the image of God and have the ability to create, to wonder, to care, to be servants, to be empathetic, to be good communicators, to have wisdom and critical knowledge and critical thought. Those are things AI isn't equipped to do. It's created by man. It's not created by God. So making sure that we maintain that image of God. I think
to touch on that. So, I know we try to do that, but I think what I hear you and I've taught moms and dads just to really reinforce the identity of their children as they grow, who they are in Christ, knowing that they're growing and they're learning. It can be hard, but
and what we're supposed to be doing in the world.
Yeah.
And how we care for our brothers is really important.
Okay.
Another thing I think we need to do is sort of redefine what a successful learner is. What we were just saying, grades for the right answer is only developing crystallized intelligence if you're very young. But what we really want them to do is to think about, what am I learning? How well did I learn? So rather than asking, did you do your homework? Asking, what did you learn from your homework?
Right.
And move that bar to learning so that they know we're more interested in how they think than in what they think.
How they think versus what they think. Because I know I kind of want to know, because I'm a parent and I'm busy. That's another level.
It's a very different level. And then, just always being aware of what the brain on technology is like, and making sure that we protect that development, choosing tools wisely, I think I would give Conmigo to a student. I would not give ChatGPT to a young student and say,
tell me the difference. Again.
Well,
you talked about it a little bit before, but what's the
Conmigo is going to ask him sometimes better questions than I would ask. So I was writing an article using the Conmigo writing tool.
Okay.
And the name of the article and the thesis was the balance between technology and a non-tech world, being outside, being outdoors.
Yeah.
My mistake was saying balance because I don't believe in balance in the two. So it just kept coming back saying, are you sure you have enough points here? Can you define this in a better way? And it frustrated me very much, but it was doing a job in saying, look at this again.
Right.
Use your metacognition. Use the skills that you know. Let's get this fixed. But it wouldn't tell me how to fix it.
Interesting, because ChatGPT will draw draft after draft after draft.
Yes.
And it's a different tool. So, okay, so Conmigo is a tool that we're really, require the students to do?
That's the only one out there that I know of right
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
I think we teach them to be critical of AI, that we show them articles on AI, say, what's wrong with this article?
Right.
My husband got a thank you note the other day, and he said, this is really nice. I said, that is totally ChatGPT.
Yeah.
He was sad to hear that, but
Well, it's funny.
I could tell.
Well, it's interesting because sort of similar is, one of the tools I've learned is as a peer, as helpers, I will dictate some thoughts. And there's a stream of consciousness or office of broad notes or multiple notes off my table, and I'll dictate it. And then I'll give it an instruction. So I did an introduction from Mondays with Mike the other day, and it was all true. It was all based on my dictation. I remember my dad from me said, "Wow, you've got really poetic." I said, "Well, thanks, Dad." In all fairness, I did say those things, but I had some help here. And I know it, but back to transparency, right? And,
Yes.
And it's interesting how it's showing up, because in some cases it clarifies the things I could never clarify real well, or take me a long time to do it. Okay.
So the other thing I would suggest to parents is there are some myths that sort of sneak into our world just because everybody's doing it. One of those myths is that technology helps regulate emotion. So I'll give my child a tablet because they're upset, and they can play a game, or they can do something because they're upset, or I want them to be quiet and they aren't going to be quiet. But that doesn't teach self-regulation. It's a substitute. And I think it's one of those myths that we have to be very careful of, because we know that technology at very young ages creates a different kind of brain. And so not falling into that. Another one is that AI makes life better by speeding things up. Busy is best. And this is truly a myth, because what we know about learning is that you have to be bored. You have to be not thinking about anything. There are two types of thought. One is focused. We know that one. But the other one is called diffuse thought. And diffuse thought is when you're not thinking about anything. And it's when your brain is connecting ideas and elaborating on those ideas. It's kind of when you can't figure out a math problem, but you go in the shower and you come up with the answer. It's when the brain isn't thinking that is putting all those ideas together. And those two parts of the brain don't work together at the same time. So you have to have that downtime in order to really it's when creativity takes place, as curiosity takes place, and that elaboration takes place.
That's one of the reasons why we often early in the morning after rest or after break, that we're like, I have an idea.
Absolutely it is, yeah.
So we need to create, for our kids or our students, we need to create that mental space.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And they need to be outdoors and being away from technology. Another myth is more information is wisdom. Information and wisdom are not the same. And so being sure that we as parents are saying, okay, what does that mean? How are you going to use that? How does that connect with this idea that seems to be totally opposite? And getting them to really, how does this connect with scripture? Another one is that screens help us learn. They do, but they can also dull curiosity, because they've done experiments and found that if a child has a question and immediately goes to Google it, all of the curiosity stops after that. They have the answer. They don't have any more curiosity. But if they're looking it up in an encyclopedia or something like that, they're seeing other things that create curiosity. And then the last one is one that you mentioned, and that is that sleep time is important. Sleep time is so important. The body needs 8 hours of sleep. The first 4 hours are the brain. They're assuming from watching the MRIs that the brain is cleaning. So it's lighting up all different areas of the brain. But the last 4 hours are spent strictly with impulses moving from the hippocampus, the memory area, to the prefrontal cortex, the storage area. And that's what their assumption, I mean, you can't get into the brain, but the assumption is that that's where long-term memories get established.
So we'll see if I understand it, why sleep is so critical. Is first half of an 8-hour sleep period is cleaning, and the second half is putting it into deep memory.
Storing it.
Storing it. It's so that we can recall it, right? Because if it doesn't go there, I can't access it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I can't.
Well, for different reasons, the Army figured out that's how important sleep was. We used to pride ourselves on how little sleep we needed. And but I think we really came to the conclusion that for a lot of reasons, to include emotional regulation,
Yes.
decision making, we knew that decision making really dropped, and frankly, the moral ethical breakdown occurred.
That's
Bad
fascinating.
combat decisions happened. Now, we were always tired to some degree, but we really valued sleep. But for students, it's obviously a little different scenario, but it's maybe even more important. And I know this is a little bit off the topic, but just sleep in the growing and developing brain. Is there anything that off the top of your head is not AI per se, but any thoughts from moms and dads, especially for kids as they get older?
Well, there's a lot of research being done on cognitive strategies and so on. And one of the things that just keeps coming up over and over and over again in my research is that you have to have iterative recall, which means you're calling it up from nothing, not a multiple choice, but you see the flashcard, you give the definition or whatever it is. Another one is called spaced practice. So I think about it, there's this whole forgetting curve that they look at, and I think about it and I recall it frequently the first few days and then a little bit less frequently the next few days, which is harder, but the more the brain has to work to recall it, the better the pathway is that is being built. And then what's called interleaved practice. So I'm doing a little bit of math and then I'm doing a little bit of reading, then I'm going back to my history and back to my math. And so that the brain again forgets, so to speak, and then you call it up again so that you're developing multiple paths in learning so that the learning moves all the way to long-term memory and has a path to call it back again.
Neural path, neural channel is reinforced in different ways, and we're learning it. So I think, back to sort of, I remember growing up, I just need to plow through my fill in the blank subject.
Yeah, no.
Right. So having this, put it down, pick it up, cycle through, for finding really helps recall it. Okay. Well,
there's a lot of research being done on what's called cognitive load.
Yes.
And that you cannot have a heavy cognitive load. You have to offload. So interleaved allows you to offload your thinking about math and take on something else to refresh it.
Yeah. Okay. Really, that's really helpful. Just sort of last thought. Big thought here, but we want to help our families and our students grow in obviously this potential, but there's a training element to this. And so how, with AI in consideration, how do we integrate that without losing oneself, whether it's ourselves or our children?
I think one of the most important things is parents need to get familiar with AI.
Yes.
Because if all we're saying to kids is don't use it, they're going to go find it, use it.
Yeah.
So getting familiar with it, looking at the philosophy and the goals behind it. So which one is going to promote learning versus give the answers, or even worse. So I've looked at a variety of them, but I think that's really important.
Are there any that's off top? And I don't mean, if not right now, maybe later, that you'd sort of encourage moms and dads to consider?
Well, again, Kanemiga was, I think, the purest of them, just because I've read Sal Khan's book and I have a better idea of where he stands.
Yeah.
They all say the right things, but I've also read the backstory and what they say and what they do are not. So I haven't been as excited about some of the others as this.
Okay.
And then working with your child to allow them, to help them understand what it means to be transparent in where you got the information, how you build it, persistently asking them to examine shallow thoughts. So looking at something that AI generated and say, what questions would you ask here? What didn't it say? Or where do you see the bias in this? I think is really important. Yeah. Helping them create deep prompts is another piece.
So I'm going to hit two things. So this is parent to child. You used to talk, and you've shared with me and coached some others on the types of questions. And I think you would talk about the power of how and why questions as opposed to what, when, and where.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you touch on that? Because the next one is, how do we ask AI questions? That's the prompt. But just talk about, is it me as a as a dad, busy dad, like I'm home with my kids, how do I engage them other than what did you learn today?
Yeah, I think you can say, why do you think that's truth? Or how do you think that compares to scripture? Or who else do you think would say the same thing or would say something completely opposite from
Right.
that? To just begin to help them be critical. We need to be building critics of AI
Yeah.
because that's how they have to think.
Yeah.
That's how we think about all knowledge, actually, is. The definition of good research is it agrees with you. So we need to be careful that
Yeah.
we don't just get them to read one side of something,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to really look at both sides.
Well, I think so. I'm going to give another just a quick scenario though, and because you and I both raised our children, and now we now both have grandchildren. But I know sometimes I would try to ask those questions, and I would get resistance, right?
Yeah.
And it was either sometimes their affect or their body posture or something. Occasionally, something would cross their mouth. Any thoughts or coaching as we engage our kids on that?
The saying for adolescents is that they love to be contacted through their emotions.
Okay.
So making a statement and saying, so you think that's not a good statement? What do you think's wrong with that statement?
Yeah.
Knowing full well that they're not going to agree with that statement at
Sure.
all. But then you can prod them and say, would you give me your proof? Why do you think that's
Yeah.
We used to have my husband would bring articles to the table at night, to the dinner table, or bring sections of books that he had read and so on, and they were controversial, or
Yeah.
they were, when the kids were younger, it was more, what would you do in this situation? But the whole idea was to get them to think deeply. So my son, one of them was in his doctoral program, and he was in an ethics course, musical ethics. And he said the professor called him up afterward and he said, what's with you? He said, you have a question for everything, and you are constantly challenging the thought process. And my son said, well, you didn't sit at my table. That's the way we think. But it was that idea of not taking things at face value,
Yeah.
but
And not being offensive in the question.
no, not trying to
just-
hurt them in any way.
Yeah.
And the more they understand the purpose of it, the more they'll get involved. But sometimes they truly just don't want to think that deeply.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned something earlier. I just, we're going to get to prompting here in a second, but, giving our children space, especially if they're not used to that type of question, right? Or to allow them, to your point, to hey, you're going to re-engage later tonight. Hey, let's get this around.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The other one I thought is allow their first answer to not be super deep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, slow the pace down a little bit. And again, your child, the mood they're in, how tired they are, right? I would, my biggest mistake was to push this when they're tired. Right? But I think the idea of learning how to engage with your children is, at various ages, by their own personalities, moms and dads, I would just encourage you, it's a way, one of the deep needs that we know that God's given us is that we want to be understood and known. And for kids, they often don't know themselves super well.
Exactly.
And us to just ask and value what they're thinking without shutting them down and walking with them is one of those ways that we can help them be fully human.
And we make this sound easy, but
Yeah.
the reality is you have kids of different developmental stages.
Yes.
So one is in the very black and white, I've got all the answers, while the other one is there's no such thing as answers. And so on. So it's always navigating. I appreciate John Hattie's website. I think it's called Making Thinking Visible.
Okay.
And he has different questions that you can ask in a variety of different ways that I think are very helpful, and I've used those.
Well, we'll put a link to that. All right, let's talk a little bit about prompting. Right? How can we help our kids or ourselves think about how do we generate a good prompt for AI other than write this for me?
Yes. We're all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy,
Right.
and Bloom's taxonomy has different levels of thinking that you have to do. And that's one of them I use quite frequently, is to say, analyze this for me or summarize this for me. I don't use analyze as often because I don't trust it, but summarizing
Yeah.
I can use. And so getting them to have the words for it, I think it can be very helpful. Just a vocabulary list of words that they can use to get good prompts.
I heard someone say the other day in a different area, but I think it maybe applies here, is that if we don't have a word for it, we we can't engage it.
Yeah.
This is where vocabulary and language and really help, because if it's new to me, I need someone like you to go,
Yeah.
okay, it's like a new thing, a new word, because the words all have ideas behind them.
So the research on vocabulary that I love, and I can't tell you who said it, but he said every vocabulary word connects to a pocket of knowledge. So you have to know the vocabulary word to really get to the pocket of knowledge.
Yeah, fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, so prompting, anything else that you would want to just sort of share with them?
I just want to focus at the end of the need to disengage from technology.
Yeah.
We've talked about curiosity and creativity and diffuse learning and things. All of those things take place away from technology. So making sure that the family has vacations from technology and that it's not there at the dinner table, and because you can't have conversation and technology at the same time. So just being sure that there's walks in nature, that there's play, that I would say, protect your family dinner time at all costs. I don't care if you have to have it at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
That family dinner hour there's loads of research that talks about the value of family dinner hour at all different areas.
Without the technology.
Without technology. And then there's some questions we can pose, but one of my favorite ones is my use of technology enhancing God's purpose in the world or not? And so just some questions to say, how is my use of technology moving me as a person spiritually, moving my family forward or is it getting in the way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Connie, I thank you so much for just helping us think more deeply, but also to how to apply it at our school for the good of our students. And we're so grateful for you over many seasons, but your continued important work in leading us. And we're very grateful. So moms and dads, there's a lot here. We're going to link some resources below for you to consider. This will open up great conversations as we get ready to come back, as we as a school are blended, right? So analog and digital. But I hope you hear from last week's conversation with Susan Erica, this week's conversation with Connie, that your kids thriving and flourishing and growth, human to human, made in the image of God, is first and foremost, and that at best, technology is a tool that we use wisely with discretion. And we encourage you to continue on that journey too, and partner with us as we really utilize these tools in this age that your kids are growing up in. So thank you, Connie.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And we'll see you all on campus soon. God bless you.